And welcome into my second episode of the Only Movie Show. I am Will, the co-host of the Everything Podcast. And joining me today is Mike, who you've heard on a couple episodes of the Everything Podcast as well. Mike, thank you for joining me today. And obviously this is the Only Movie Show, but once in a while we'll sneak some TV shows or stuff like that into this as well. And that's what we're going to do today with the Book of Boba Fett, or The Mandalorian Season 2.5. I was seeing some sites online, Mike, calling it The Mandalorian Season 2.5, but I'll just for now call it by its official title. The Book of Boba Fett had its seventh and final episode this past week, and where do you want to start?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Always great to be on any version of the Everything Podcast and having this time to talk about movies. And, you know, the Book of Boba Fett is born from a film series and from the movie, so it seems appropriate to have it within that context. I'd like to talk about this right out of the gate. You already said Mandalorian 2.5. In some of my research online, I read that the creators always considered this to be the third season of The Mandalorian, and they didn't even call the first episode, sometimes they go by the hundredths. So like the first episode of The Mandalorian Season 1 is episode 100. First episode is Season 2, and their creation and production is episode 200 or 201. Do you know what they call this? The Book of Boba Fett? The first episode, in my research they called it episode 301. So they're definitely seeing it as part of that narrative. But the whole part about shifting the expectations of the audience and having Boba Fett completely disappear for almost 2 whole episodes, and to have the storyline of the Mandalorian and Grogu come in later on, I just thought was such a creative achievement.
Obviously, Boba Fett is in the final few or so episodes of The Mandalorian Season 2. So I just feel like part of what they might have been thinking was it's really meant for these two to be doing things together, and they make a dynamic duo. So I just wonder if they just really thought that Boba Fett and the Mandalorian were a great couple to just have on screen together.
You know, there's so much to explore. They both come from that bounty hunter background. They both have evolved, I think, as people over the course of their lifetimes to have a deeper understanding of who they are and what they do. They both seem to be very loyal to a code. So I think you've hit the nail on the head here. It's very overlapping storylines. And I think through this particular thread of The Mandalorian and now with the Book of Boba Fett, they're really exploring this bounty hunter. You know, it's interesting too. I just thought of this. That's Han Solo. Really, he kind of had that hired gun, do certain things for a price, and he evolved over time. So really just interesting. I just had a thought.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this takes place after Return of the Jedi.
Correct. Maybe, I don't know exactly how many years after, maybe 10 or so, but yes, after Return of the Jedi.
Well, we have one bounty hunter in The Mandalorian. We have another bounty hunter in Boba Fett. We have seen Mark Hamill return to this series, even in the form of his great character, Luke Skywalker. And I'm just saying, could there be room in this storyline for Han Solo?
I mean, I'm trying to think about where that would fit, but in terms of Han Solo, the character, he would very much be still alive at this time. Same with General Leia Organa. So if they wanted to, I think they absolutely could do something like that.
I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's possible as Harrison Ford is, still alive. And unfortunately, with the passing of Carrie Fisher, it would be much more challenging to have her role surface somewhere in there. But just a thought as we roll forward.
And that's a good thought as well. So let's dive into particularly episode 6 and Luke Skywalker being in it, Ahsoka Tano being in it as well. I just thought that was such a great episode because it rewarded fans by allowing them a chance to see a wise Luke, unlike the last Jedi. Now, I think we were able to see a very wise Luke in The Rise of Skywalker, but I can understand not being able to kind of accept that after how kind of grumpy he was in The Last Jedi. So I thought it was so great because fans were able to see a wise Luke, see him train Grogu, but at the same time, it continued to follow the kind of father-son relationship between Grogu and the Mandalorian, and how Grogu's heart wasn't fully in it because the Mandalorian was who he was meant to be with. So I just thought that was such a well-done episode in that you get to see Luke train him, but the father-son storyline and stuff between him and the Mandalorian was kind of the cloud over the whole episode.
Well, thank you, Will, for bringing this up. So many themes within the entire Star Wars universe have to do with fathers and sons, parents and daughters, mentors and role models, mentees, and so they're definitely mining that terrain. And to see Luke in his post-Return of the Jedi phase was so rewarding on so many levels. And then to have Ahsoka Tano by the great Rosario Dawson coming in, whose acting I've particularly enjoyed. I don't want to go too far down this road, in her scenes and appearances in the Marvel Netflix series Daredevil, coming in as, Ahsoka Tano, and then Grogu. And the thing is, too, after you had the Mandalorian come in episode 5 and just take over the series, you thought, oh, that's going to be a one-off. We're not going to see it again. They're going to go right back into Boba Fett. No, they subvert your expectations and take you deeper into historical, nostalgic, glorious terrain within the Star Wars universe.
And then in episode 7, they do obviously, well, I guess they call it Chapter 7. That's how I tend to see these Star Wars show episodes referred to as. But anyway, episode 7, I kind of like to refer to it as a split episode. Half The Mandalorian, half the Book of Boba Fett. Just because of how great the previous 2 episodes were, I didn't find it as rewarding and great as those with the fighting and stuff, but it was still very good. There were some great scenes within it, and I do think it did a good job setting up what will be the actual Mandalorian Season 3.
Want to give big shout-outs, too, to my man Timothy Oliphant coming back as Cobb Vanth. I've loved this actor in so many different series, so to see him reemerge, and I'm hoping and holding my breath in that extra scene we saw in the credits, that was Cobb Vanth in that chamber, that healing chamber that you often saw Boba in. I'm hoping that's Cobb Vanth. I want more Cobb Vanth, and I thought about this morning. I want him to have his own series.
Whoa.
Within the Mandalorian universe. I actually think he could have it. I thought the Cad Bane character was fantastic. Physically played by Dorian Kinji, and the voice was of Corey Burton. And I thought, and I have read some of these things. Will you tell me what your opinion is? Should they have killed that character off?
No, I do think they should have kept him alive. I thought they had a really good thing going with how evil he was. So, yeah, I think they could have done him and Boba Fett's fight and made it where he was, maybe injured a lot, but not dead.
Right, almost said he scurried off, because I just thought that was a masterful villain.
Yeah, and he is in the Clone Wars as well, so Star Wars fans got a big surprise seeing him in live action.
Well, it is clear that Jon Favreau and his team absolutely consider the Clone Wars to be a big part of the Star Wars universe, because they mine that terrain often, and some of the behind-the-scenes discussions and interviews that we saw from Mandalorian Season 1, we know one of their creators of the Clone Wars was involved in the Mandalorian team, and so yes, I'm loving the crossover that we're seeing between characters like, Cad Bane and Ahsoka Tano.
All right, we're a bit over time, so one word answer. Letter grade for the book of Boba Fett, a.k.a. The Mandalorian, I guess, season 2.5.
I'm going to give it an A-, but I'm going to say, for me, there were 3 episodes that were an A+.
I think I completely agree with you, but I think episode 2 was an A+.
That's one of the ones I'm giving an A+.
As well. Okay, got it. Alrighty, thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Only Movies Show.